Act 7. Well, here Stephen was murdered by the Jews, stoned to death under the arrangement and direction of Saul, who later became Paul. Now, Saul, as we know, changed his name to Paul later on, and he became one of the greatest Christians that there's ever lived. But at this time, Saul was persecuting the Christians. We read in verse 58 that the witnesses laid down their jackets at the feet of a young man named Saul. And we're encouraged to imagine the scene. Saul would have been smiling smugly to himself, so glad that his evil plan to kill Stephen was succeeding. And as he died, Stephen asks Jesus to forgive the men who were killing him. And that prayer was so strangely answered in that Saul was to be converted to Christ. Well, you see there how our prayers for others, for third parties, if you like, can have huge results. You can pray for someone who is apparently evil, and maybe they really are evil, and in your lifetime you may see no results, but that doesn't mean that your prayer is not going to be answered. It may be answered well after your death. When Jesus returns, both Stephen and Saul, or Paul, are going to be resurrected, and they'll live together forever in the eternal service of our dear Lord Jesus. They will meet each other, and I suppose, humanly speaking, Stephen will be so surprised and happy that his final prayer was heard so powerfully. And this is going to be our experience too. Human relationships, which now seem to be impossible, will then be changed. Those we thought were the worst unbelievers, we will find have changed. I mean, think of the story of Moses. He was saved from death by Pharaoh's daughter and grew up in the court of Pharaoh, while his parents, Amram and Jochebed, lived and suffered basically in a slave camp. Probably they died relatively young because of being in forced labor. Moses' mother would have thought something like, well, my Moses started well, such a sweet little baby, but he had the soft life. God was very gracious to my boy, but he didn't respond. He just enjoyed the soft life and forgot about us, his mum and dad. And he showed no further interest, sadly, in the true God, and he was caught up with the world. But when Moses was 40, things changed. By then, his mum and dad were probably dead. And then at age 80, when they were for sure they were dead, Moses was used by God to save Israel from Egypt. What a pleasant surprise for Moses' mum and dad when they awake at the resurrection and find that their son was in fact one of God's greatest servants, and as with Stephen and Saul. So things aren't as they seem. Our prayers, our effort for others spiritually will have big effects even after we're dead. And the kingdom is going to be a time of wonderful surprises.